Welcome back to Women of Wealth, where generational wisdom meets ambition, and we equipped you with the tools to build a lasting wealth, business, and impact. I'm your host, Holly Woods Gray.
And I'm your co host, Ali Ramo. And today we're honored to bring you a powerful and deeply meaningful conversation with certified financial planner Kathleen Covey. Kathleen is on a mission to ensure that no woman ever has to worry about outliving her money. With over 30 years of experience, she specializes in helping women navigate the unique financial challenges they face, from gender pay gap to career pauses for caregiving, and turning uncertainty into a clear, actionable plan. What makes Kathleen's work so impactful is not just her expertise in retirement income, planning, tax efficiency, and estate preservation, but her heart behind the work. Her journey is deeply personal, having stepped away from her own career to care for her brother during his 30-year battle with Parkinson's and later supporting her aging in laws. She truly understands the caregiving penalty and how it impacts women's financial future.
In addition to her work with clients, Kathleen is passionate about financial education, having provided financial reports for local TV stations and holding lifetime teaching credential for community colleges. In today's episode, we're diving into how women can take control of their retirement strategy, optimize Social Security, and build financial security that aligns with every season of their life. So whether you're planning your next chapter, supporting your clients, or simply ready to take ownership of your financial future, this conversation is one you won't want to miss. Let's dive in.
Kathleen, we're so excited to have you with us. So let's start here. What first led you to the mission of helping women feel confident and secure about their financial future?
Well, I was a former teacher and knew nothing about investing. I was a teacher in Oregon, and I honestly got tired of the politics in education. And so decided that I would come visit my mom in San Diego and decided to move back down here and start a different career.
Great. Well, thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you.
We talk a lot about retirement planning all the time. I mean, obviously you and I were chatting before we started this episode, but where do you see women needing a different approach than traditional planning models have provided?
Well, Ali mentioned the pay gap. We still have a pay gap. It's about 88 cents to every dollar a man makes. That will reduce your Social Security benefits. If you have a pause in your career, as I have had, that also can affect your Social Security and pension and investing for your future. So there's a number of different things. We live longer than men, statistically. So those things take special planning when you're looking at your long-term future. And women don't seem to have as much confidence. Men or women have not been taught anything about financial planning and finances. So it's getting better, especially because of the internet. We can go online and find out a lot of things. Not always the best advice, but you can find out a lot of things on the internet that was not true a long time ago.
Yeah, so I wanted to hear a little bit more about your story because you used to be in education. And from my understanding, Covey Financial was a family business, right? Can you tell us more about that and how you got into that?
Yeah. My father passed away. My mom was born and raised in San Diego, but I was born and raised in Northern California. And when my father passed away at age 60, my mom decided to move back down to San Diego because this is where all of her family was. So when I moved back, at that time, my mom was starting training with one of the large insurance agencies. And I just happened to fall into a position, a company that did life insurance and invests the rest. They were popular a number of years ago. I don't know if they still exist, but it got me set on my path. And then my mom joined me with that company. And then one of the gentlemen that represented one of the investment companies recommended I go see a gentleman that had was working in the financial planning industry, and he had founded a company. And that's where my mom and I went, and we're very happy there for many, many years, and loved what we started to do. And so we formed the company together, and I worked with my mom for over 20 years, and it was wonderful till she passed away unexpectedly.
Well, that's a great story. I mean, what a gift to get to work with your mom for 20 years. We talk about retirement a lot, but I think that I'd like to just take it back to some basics. So when somebody hears, that I'm in insurance, they always call me a financial planner or whatever. Then I have to correct them like, no, I'm not a financial planner. We have people that are financial planners that we can refer to you. And then also like financial advisor. Can you break it down for the women listening to our show about the difference in the different roles and why it's important to have consultants that are able to do multiple things?
Yes. Because I'm a certified financial planner, which is a certification that requires certain things of me. The number one is being a fiduciary, which basically means I always do what is in the best interest of my clients. So the CFP designation is the most recognized and most respected certification in the financial planning industry. Basically, anyone can call themselves a financial planner. And there's a lot of different people that use that term for a lot of different reasons. As a CFP, I look at a holistic approach. So I am not just a money manager. I start with a plan that addresses your particular individual needs and requirements for your lifestyle and your life and what the goals are that you want to achieve. So I'm looking at, it's kind of like building a house. What's the foundation? And you have to have a strong foundation of a house. That is basically all of your insurance coverages. So you want to make sure that you have health insurance, life insurance, liability insurance, any of the insurances, homeowners, auto. So that's the foundation. And then we step into, you need to have emergency funds. So that is about anywhere from 3 to 6 months of your expenses set aside in something very liquid like a savings account or a money market. And then we go to the next level of looking at your investments. But in order to get to that point, you really need to have clarity of where your finances are. So that's what we do a lot, is just how much are you spending? What are you spending the money on? How much money are you making? How much is left over? Are you spending too much at Starbucks every week? Just looking at all the places that there may be leaks in your budget that you could plug in order to have money to invest.
And so is there something that you've seen people commonly overlook when it comes to long-term planning?
Yes. I've gone through this personally. I was a caregiver for a lady in her 90s. She was a family friend. She had no family. She, unfortunately, she was too old when long-term care kind of came out, like long-term care insurance came out. And even though she had been a really good saver, when it came to her reaching her 90s and really needing help, we started with her help in the home, and then she needed 24-hour care. And that is very difficult. She could not pay for a long-term care facility. And part of that, she didn't qualify for Medi-Cal in California because she had too much income. But having too much income does not necessarily pay for long-term care. So that was a very tricky situation. And I think that people don't think about that aspect of their life as they get older, really looking at what am I going to do? And sometimes people think, oh, my kids are going to take care of me. Well, that's not in my opinion, that's not a good plan. Your kids may not be able to take care of you. Your kids may not want to take care of you. So I really recommend that they start a plan and get that. I'm a big proponent of long-term care. I really think that it's an important aspect of long-term planning because statistically, we're all going to need long-term care at some point.
This is a conversation that I had today with one of my clients. It's interesting how many people think, I mean, first and foremost, we usually talk about retirement, what their income is now, what it's going to look like when they retire. But I also meet with a lot of single women that do have kids, but not necessarily kids that live here, or not necessarily kids that are going to be part of their long-term, long care plan. Because, as their mom, there's certain things that you want them to do, and there's certain things you don't want them to do. And you don't want it to have to be out of necessity, because that just puts strain on the relationship, or it can put strain on the relationship. My mom got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was 3 years old and went into a wheelchair full time when I was 14. So although I wasn't her primary caregiver, there was a lot of times in my life I had to do things that I would have chosen not to do if I had that choice. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it is really important, especially for single women, to think about what will happen. But even married women that maybe they have a spouse that's older than them, and it only has to be like a couple years older than them, just because, the statistics show that women live longer than men. And if they are, if they're 5 years, 10 years, 20 years older, you're probably going to be single at some point, and you got to prepare for that. Right. So as the caregiver role, how do you suggest, or how do you advise your clients to really prepare for being on the giving side of that and being on the receiving side of that?
Yeah, the giving side of that is one, the baby boomer generation, which I'm part of, is what we call the sandwich generation. So a lot of baby boomers have kids in high school or college, so they're helping their kids through college, and aging parents. And it's difficult. You have to split your time, and how to come up with a schedule to really make that happen is difficult. Caregiving is one of having my own experience, one of the most difficult things you can do, just because you don't really get a break. Now, if you do have long-term care insurance, you can get respite care, but it's just a matter of really making those plans, and especially for single women. And one of the things that a lot of women, and especially single women, erase that, but women in particular don't think about. There's a couple of things with Social Security and Social Security benefits and how you can take them that can help women in particular. One thing is, because we take that pause possibly to take care of family members, and you may not have paid into Social Security as much as a spouse, you can take a spousal benefit, which means that you are claiming on your spouse's benefit that they paid in. So say if they have a $4,000 benefit that they will be receiving, you can receive half of that as your benefit, but it does not reduce his benefit. So that is one way. I just did a case for some clients where they were unaware that she could do that and it would not reduce his benefit. And the other thing is, along those lines, if you have been married and you're divorced, but you were married for at least 10 years, you can also claim on your ex-spouse's benefit. If it's more than yours, you can do that. He does not need to know that. It will not reduce his benefit. but it can help you if it's going to give you more money. So those are a couple of things that I find that most women don't know. Actually, most people don't know that. And it can be very important.
I have a question regarding that. So what if the spouse is deceased and the person hasn't started claiming the the husband was receiving Social Security. He's the ex-husband. And then he passed away. Can the surviving ex-spouse still claim his benefit?
I would have to confirm that, but I believe that that is the case. Yes. Excuse me.
There's so many different ways you can take Social Security. So it really is good for people to get with an expert on Social Security. I know just enough to be dangerous because we did have the windfall elimination provision for teachers, and now we don't have the windfall elimination for teachers and the government offset, which is why I'm asking the question, because I have several clients who are retired. They did fall underneath the government offset, but I think now they might be able to collect their ex-spouse's benefit. So I might have some work to do there.
Yeah, that's very true. And I've had clients that I've told about, the windfall, the elimination of the windfall, and they have been able to collect in fact, I know that's true because I have a client that did that. Her husband had already passed away. He was a fireman. And because of the windfall, he hadn't paid in as much, but he had worked prior. And she was able to claim on his benefit.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Makes, those little things. And that's kind of wisdom that has come from years of doing this, of doing the financial planning and continually educating myself.
Yeah. Well, so a lot of our listeners are business owners or entrepreneurs. So how do you guide, those solopreneurs or business owners when it comes to retirement planning? Certain vehicles like 401ks or SEPs.
There's some good, those are both good vehicles to plan for your retirement. There's some subtleties that you need to be aware of. The SEP, self-employed pension plan, if you have employees, you have to contribute to their SEP account. And the employer contributes, the employee does not. It has to be the same percentage as the employer is paying for himself, his or herself. Sorry. So if you're putting away as the employer 20%, you need to contribute 20% for each of your employees. Now in California, starting in January of this year, if you have one employee, you need to set up either a pension plan or be part of the Cal Savers program. If you don't make that choice, there's big fines, is my understanding. Big fines for not doing that. The 401k, the solo 401k, has higher limits, contribution limits. The problem with the 401k is it's an ERISA plan, which means it has to follow the IRS requirements. And that can be burdensome for paperwork and more costly. So not that I don't recommend a 401k, just understand what the differences are. The SEP is much easier to set up. It doesn't have to follow the IRS requirements. And the 401k does have to follow them. And that, like I said, bookkeeping wise, contribution wise, that could be a little bit more burdensome for employers.
And also for employers, if they don't have a plan set up and they had to set it up for January, there are some benefits from Secure Act 2.0 that also help the employers that are setting up these plans. They are, and I would have to look them up again, but I believe that you can get 100% of the cost back that it costs you to set up the plan for the first year. And then it goes down to 75% and then 50% and then 25% is what the actual tax credit always is a 25% tax break for setting up those plans and maintaining them and managing them. So
Yes.
if you do have one employee and you don't have your retirement plan set up, make sure you do get with someone to set that up, because you want to, you can take advantage of the Cal Savers, but I have heard that Cal Savers doesn't give a ton of options. And so it would be better if you meet with a professional to help set that up.
Yeah, especially you can set up a SEP very easily and low cost. So, yeah. And yes, you're right about the tax credits.
And it's an addition to yourself as the employee. So it's not like if you're the business owner and you're a W-2 on your business, it's an addition to the owner.
Correct. Yeah.
So are there other opportunities or areas where business owners maybe aren't protecting themselves long term, or they're leaving money or opportunity on the table for future planning that you've come across?
There always is. The tax savings can be great. As a self-employed person for over 30 years, that you can write off a lot of things on your tax returns. I really strongly suggest you get a good tax person to help you with your taxes. You don't have to have a CPA. There is another designation called an EA, enrolled agent, that is trained strictly to do taxes. They tend to be less expensive than a CPA. And a lot of CPAs don't do taxes. All they are doing is audits, because that's the main goal of a CPA, is to do auditing. So just know that there's EAs, and those are really good, and they'll help you find all those missing, possibly, deductions that you can take as a business owner.
Is there a minimum that you recommend business owners pay themselves so that their Social Security is generating? Like, I know like 2 years ago, the max you wanted to pay into Social Security was $165,000 for that year, because that maxed out your Social Security for 1 year, right? But then some people have the philosophy like, well, just pay the minimum so you can get the Medicare, and then invest the rest, because you can make a better return than what Social Security can provide for you, especially like people that are Allie's age, the millennials and whatnot. Their Social Security is going to be impacted far more than some of us that are getting closer to that age, right? So what is kind of your rule of thumb on that whole conversation about how much entrepreneurs should put into and pay themselves, as well as paying their Social Security and Medicare? And then do you believe like they should do the minimum and then invest the rest, or do you think it's good for them to take advantage of those guidelines that are set up by the IRS?
As an entrepreneur or solopreneur, the problem with paying into Social Security is you're paying twice as much as an employee. As an employer or self-employed, you are paying both sides of the Social Security tax. So you're paying the employer portion and the employee portion, which is double the amount. It's almost 15%. So for a lot of people, it doesn't make a lot of sense to pay more than is necessary, because if you do want to get Medicare, in my opinion, it's a lot less expensive than trying to pay for your individual health care, especially after you're age 65. So I would say you want to pay into Social Security, but don't pay any more than is necessary.
And Holly, are you talking about someone who may have like a corporation where, what they pay themselves is a little different than just being like a 1099?
Yeah, if you're an S corp, or C corp, and then you pay, it doesn't. If you're an S corp, you're still paying both sides of it, because there's no one to pay the other side. If you're a C corp, then probably the profits of your company, it might make sense as a C corp for you to pay. You're still paying both sides, but you're paying both sides for your entire employee base, not just you. So on the solopreneur or the entrepreneur or the business owner that has an S corp, I think it's a really good point that you want to look at, like, do you want to pay the maximum into Social Security? I mean, you might want to, just so that you get your taxes taken out. Some people aren't that organized, so it's easier for them to do it that way as an S Corp. I know those of us that have had S Corps for a long time, I know that, you know, it's easy to get into the habit of not paying payroll. So I would say that if you can, whatever you can set up to make yourself most consistent is what you ought to do. I did look it up, and the minimum amount for that you have to pay into Social Security in order to qualify right now is you have to have at least 40 Social Security credits, which is about 10 years, and you have to pay in per year a minimum of $7,560. So it's really not that much in order to take advantage of it. So that's good.
Yeah. So Kathleen, I know you had stepped aside to do some caregiving for your family. And as an entrepreneur, how were you set up, or what would you have done differently to set yourself up to be able to give yourself more time to be able to be there for your family? Like, how did that impact you and your business?
It definitely impacted my business for two different reasons. One was taking so much time off to help my family and be there for them. I couldn't really market at all during that time because I just had to maintain my existing clients. The other thing is, in my case, my brother was diagnosed in his mid-20s with Parkinson's. And so his finances were not in any position to pay for his being for the 30 years that he had the disease and suffered with it. So I was not all the time, not all 30 years, but for a substantial amount of that time, I was paying for his household, for apartment, for long-term care, and so that really can drain the finances very quickly. I don't know if people understand the cost of a long-term care facility, but that can be up to $100,000 a year, and it doesn't take long to wipe out a good savings account or investment account to pay for that.
And I know he was diagnosed very young.
Yes.
So has that shaped, how you talk to people about different long-term care plans or life insurance plans at an early age?
Yes. I try to get people to think about those things much earlier than they're probably thinking they need to. I don't know anyone that would sell a long-term care plan insurance policy to a 20-year-old. Although I think that might be good in some cases, but in your 40s, you should start thinking about this. I had a client that we did those old first available long-term care policies that were great. And at about 55, he had a major stroke and could no longer work. But they had really good long-term care policy, and it allowed them, he needed long-term care for about 2 months. And so that was taken care of. It didn't affect their finances. And now that he's older, he needs help in his home and will one day need it for a care facility. And they're taken care of. So it did not affect their ability to retire comfortably and securely. So yeah, I think we need to start planning much younger. And I had another client that we were looking at long-term care at that time, and she had, I don't remember, it wasn't a stroke, it must have been a heart attack, something that actually prevented her at that point from one day to the next, literally one day to the next, then she could not get coverage.
Yes, I've had that happen where people have been in the hospital and they've called me. We actually just had a gal, she didn't have a stroke and it wasn't an aneurysm, it was something in between the two. But we did get her approved on a term policy from Nationwide but she had to go through, it took about 6 months to get the approval because she had to go through a sleep apnea test. She had to go through like all these different markers, and they wanted all full medical review and everything. And she was young. She was in her early 50s, and we finally did get the coverage, but we had to like hold her hand all the way through these appointments and whatnot she was going to. So, I mean, the best time to get life insurance was yesterday. So I guess the next best time is today, especially if you don't have any health issues. I mean, the sooner the better. I mean, for a long time, I had pretty much everybody I wrote up for life insurance, they sold right through. I was in my early 40s when I started in this business. So that's pretty much where my friend and peer group were. And so everybody that I sold insurance to, and then you have that one thing that happens. So it happened to my sister. She got diagnosed with cancer, and it's like a gut punch because we had talked about it, but we never did the application, and then she got diagnosed with cancer, and she'd probably be eligible now, but now she's like 8 years after it. And now the cost of it is probably out of reach for her. She does have great benefits through her job, but that's not always the case,
Yeah, that's not always the case.
So let's talk a little bit about the care somebody needs, because I have some experience with this too. I was the financial responsible person in a situation with a friend who lived in Texas, and he had some money. He had a couple $100,000, but it wasn't that much, and he had to completely deplete that before he could get on the Medicaid. And it was an interesting process, but he needed memory care because he had early onset Alzheimer's. And so if somebody doesn't wait to, if somebody doesn't get their products before they get the diagnosis, do you have any recommendations on some steps that family can take to ensure that maybe they are able to, if there's a certain investment into this person's care, that are there products out there like that can be of a benefit for the caregiver?
I was thinking more of the individual. There's annuities that also have a rider for long-term care.
Oh, yeah.
Those are sometimes obviously more easy to get because even if you have a health issue. There are also annuities, again, that can, that will kind of take that money. If you're putting like $200,000 in a particular type of annuity, that takes it out of the Medi-Cal or Medicare, Medicaid, benefit resources. So that's another way of doing it. There used to be, and there is not any longer, a way to basically transfer assets to another person so they are not in your possession, so to speak. I know in California that is no longer legal, and if you make that recommendation, you the advisor will get in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Not only the family, but you as the advisor. So you can't advise that type of strategy any longer.
So annuities aren't considered, like a source of income for Medicaid?
Yes, they can be for the income, but it does take it away from what the assets that they're looking at, because you have to spend down your assets to, I think it's $3,000 or something very close to that these days, before you qualify for Medicaid or Medi-Cal in California. So it would take it away from that, so your assets are depleted, and yet you still, especially if you're married, you have a spouse that's dependent on that money. That's one way to help that surviving spouse.
Okay. Well, are there any other kind of tips that you would like to share with our audience before we move on to the lightning round question?
Yes, something that I feel is very important. And as we think about our finances this time of the year, planning for taxes, if you have gotten a divorce and you had a will or a trust, you need to have a new will or trust, because getting a divorce does not void that will or trust that you had while you were married. And you also want to change the beneficiaries on all your accounts. So your IRAs, your SEPs, any other type of account that you had when you were married, you want to make sure that those items are changed to what your current desire is.
Yes, and I think it's interesting because I met with somebody today. She got divorced back in 2004, and she just in 2023 changed her name back to her maiden name. So she wanted to make sure all of her stuff had her right name on it. And I think that's a pretty timely conversation, as some people are, wanting to get their name corrected for voting or whatever. I believe that like marriage certificate, birth certificate, driver's license that have the name that you're going to be voting in is enough for that. However, some people are concerned about that. So it is a good time just to make sure that all your documentations and all your important financial papers are in good order with the name that you want on them, as well as the beneficiaries.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think people often forget about that. I mean, I've had a few clients on their 403B had their ex-spouse from 2001 is when they got divorced, was still her beneficiary. And then I had another one, and her I mean, that was only 2 years, but her spouse was still the beneficiary on it. So I appreciate that reminder to dot all your I's and cross the T's after divorce, and especially, getting a new will or trust.
Yeah. Yes,
So
absolutely. And it's something, I don't believe most attorneys, when you're getting a divorce, make those recommendations or reminders. So it's important to be working with someone that does remind you of those things and help you get it taken care of.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Kathleen. And to wrap up, we do a lightning round with all of our guests. So they're short, either one-word answers or just short answers for each question. So what's one word to describe your leadership style?
Heart-based.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
What's your go-to productivity hack?
My productivity hack. I'm not sure how to answer that.
Keeping everything organized, putting everything in your calendar.
Yes, those things are very helpful. Making lots of notes in one place.
Notes in one place. That's important. What's your favorite business book or podcast you recommend?
I really like Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Nice.
Yeah, that's made a big difference.
That's the only book that pushed us off the top off the top bestseller. Top bestseller, Atomic Habits, and it's been out for a long time.
Sorry, but it's a great book, and it really does make a difference in your habits, creating good habits.
And I own it.
Yeah. So what's a money myth you wish would go away forever?
Oh, that you have to have a lot of money or be wealthy in order to need the services of a financial planner. It's not true. Financial planners can help anybody and everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I know we've got a lot of nuggets. Holly was writing all of those notes down.
I know. I have like 2 pages of notes.
I saw her
I
going.
would like to find out, Kathleen, I'd like to find out what would be the best way somebody could get in touch with you if they wanted to schedule an appointment or find out more about your services.
And I do provide 30 minutes consultation without charge, so complimentary, no obligation. So if somebody just has a quick question, they can give me a call. My number is 858-653-4800. I also have a website, which is coveyandcovey.com. That's COVEY and spelled out, Covey.com. And my email address is kcovey@ifg.com, rr.com. So it's ifgrr.com. And the other email is kcovey@coveyandcovey.com, which is probably easier to remember.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on our show today, and we really appreciate all of the knowledge that you've shared with us.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored that you invited me to be a guest. Thrilled.